Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Mount Athos and Aquinas Fellowship. In this episode, I'll be discussing the difficult teaching of Aquinas on relations. After laying out his understanding of relations, we will go on to discuss why God is said to be only logically related to the world and not really. Then we'll reflect on St. Maximus the Confessor and St. Irenaeus of Lyon to show that what Aquinas means by logical is identical to their understanding. Let's begin. For Aquinas, following Aristotle, relation falls under the umbrella of beings called accidents. Accidents are actualities which substances are said to obtain. Substance, properly speaking, is that which stands under accidents and is subsistent. An accident is that which inheres in a substance and modifies it into an individual kind. Unlike substances, accidents have no existence apart from their subjects in which they inhere. Quality, quantity, passion, and relations are all said to be accidents. However, though relation is an accident, it differs from other accidents in several ways. One of the most fundamental ways in which relation differs from the other categories of being is that relations don't modify the subject. Quality, quantity, passion, etc. all are such that its identity is defined relative to its subject in which it inheres. Relations, however, denotes two terms. By definition, this category of being escapes the definitional restraint, and thus the essence, of the other categories. Indeed, relations are adherent, but with a twist given its dependence upon two terms. In short, the essence of relation is an outside referring, making it stand aloof from the other categories of being which, by definition, are dependent on a sole subject. Let us now see what constitutes a relation and what kinds of relations there are. Having shown the uniqueness of relations, it is only right to now consider the different kinds of relations that obtain. By definition, relation necessitates two terms, and thus three classes of relations follow. The first class is what we call a real relation. A real relation obtains in the direction of both terms if and only if all three of the following criteria are met. Criteria number 1, the relation must be founded on either quantity, action, or passion. Criteria number 2, the relatives must be of the same order. Criteria number 3, there must be an interconnect or inclination. Now, if any of the three categories are wanting, or criterias are wanting in any direction, then a real relation does not obtain. The second class of relation to consider is what is called a logical relation. A logical relation is a relation that is only in the apprehension of our reason, but does not have a concrete existence in either term. These relations have no existence apart from reason. The third and final class of relations is what is called a mixed relation. Mixed relation means that from the vantage point of one term, a real relation obtains, and from the vantage point of the other term, only a logical relation obtains. Now, in order to understand what is and is not being said by the definitions I have outlined, I think it's only proper to start substantiating these definitions by concrete examples. Albeit since this video is honed in on the relation between God and creatures, it is proper that we place our focus on examples for the mixed relations class specifically. In the future, God willing, I will make a video explaining how God is three really distinct, subsisting relations. For now, mixed relations has our attention. So let us look at some examples in real life. The first example that we will consider is very basic. Imagine together with me that you are seeing a tree for the first time. Your passive intellect that did not know prior to the experience what a tree was has gained something new. The tree has, in a sense, stepped into your mind and drawn out from it a new actuality. It's as if the womb of your intellect received a new concept because of its experience from the tree. This new actuality is a real relation inhering within the subject and modifying it. The subject prior to experiencing the tree is not in every aspect identical with the subject consequent to the experience. Before the tree, the subject had no knowledge of a tree. After the tree, the subject has gained something new. What has he gained? A relation. Now let us logically think of the tree. Did the tree gain anything by acting upon the mind of the subject? The answer would be no. The tree remains altogether the same, antecedent to and consequent to the subject experiencing it. In this sense, the man obtained a real relation, while the tree obtained only a logical relation. All the criteria for a real relation was met from the point of view of the rational agent. The agent's intellect was moved to act, the object was of the same order as the agent, and the agent was inclined towards the tree, since knowledge begets inclination. The tree, however, was neither inclined towards the agent, nor is it acting with intention upon the agent. Since it fails two of the three criteria, a real relation does not obtain. In short, the tree gained nothing new in this relation. So now I want to consider an example as a little more apropos to our consideration of God and his creatures. Imagine together with me a math teacher in a classroom of students. Imagine that this teacher is steeped in knowledge, such that he isn't wanting in any area when it comes to his particular area of expertise. He knows all the principles and conclusions of math in a profound way, where he is solely in the position to give and not receive. Now imagine the student who knows absolutely nothing about math attending his class. The teacher's job is to reach into the student's potency to receive math principles and draw out of the student's nothingness an understanding of math. In this scenario, the teacher is the giver and the students are the receivers. The teacher is, by his own actuality through which he understands math, drawing a kind of likeness of his understanding out of the students' minds. This potency for knowledge within the students is bringing about a change within them. The change is all one-sided, as the teacher is gaining nothing new by extending his knowledge to them. In this scenario, the teacher is really acting and causally bringing about a new actuality in the students. But now a question to consider and must be raised is whether or not the teacher can be considered qua teacher prior to the students being present. For if there are no students, then how can there be a teacher, since the very word implies a receptive student? The answer to this is simple if we reason rightly. First, if the teacher's knowledge of math is viewed as a kind of power, then he is always a teacher in the respect that he always has that which makes him to be such. For the whereby that he is a teacher of math is ever present to him, even if that knowledge doesn't terminate outside of him. But if we regard the actual action of teaching, that is, as terminating in a student outside of the teacher, then we must say that teacher is predicated by the act of the student's reception of the teaching. Thus, in one sense, he is always a teacher as possessing that whereby he would act transitively to share if students were present. But in another sense, the designation of the title teacher is a designator of one who actually teaches to students. It seems for a moment that I have strayed from the intention of the example, but we shall soon see that the straying wasn't unintentional, but rather a setting up of how God and creatures are related. Taking the principles that I have laid out, we shall now go on to consider God and his relationship to his creatures. If you're watching this video, it's probably because you heard others objecting to the idea of logical relation between God and his creatures. If you followed me thus far, I think you've already begun to conceptualize what is and is not being said by logical relation. The analogy of the teacher and the student is about as close as you can get for an example in the material order of God and his creatures. The fundamental idea is that God gains nothing new by the creatures. When we say God is sovereign, we are speaking of his power and his wisdom as moving things and ordering them to their rightful ends. Likewise, titles for God such as Lord is not adding anything to God, but rather the creature. For God is Lord because of his power, and yet this power isn't measured by the term, that is the creature, but rather the creature is measured by God's power. When we say God is Lord, we are making a statement in reference to God's power as terminating in creation. Remember when we considered the math teacher under two aspects. the first being the whereby, and the last being the act terminating in another term. Likewise, God is Lord eternally, since this very title denotes power. Creator can also be applied to God from eternity, considering like God, we come to some understanding of God's power as visibly manifested in creation. But whether or not God creates, or does not create, doesn't change God. Even as the tree remained the same and the teacher remained the same antecedent to and consequent to the relative term, even so is it with God. The creature pulls nothing new out of God. God, however, grants existence out of nothing and moves all things unto their proper ends. Thus God brings about a new actuality in creatures and continues to do so as he draws them into deeper perfections. If the creature was really related to God in the Aristotelian sense, then this would mean that the creature also draws out of God a new perfection which he otherwise lacked. The creature would be, in a sense, moving God even as a tree moved the intellect to understand. Something has actually changed in the creature in virtue of its relation to God, but God does not change in relation to the creature. Hence why God can say to Jeremiah, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you." God had pre-contained virtually in the divine essence, the logoi of Jeremiah, all that Jeremiah would be, and Jeremiah's end is already present. Nothing happens in creation that draws out of God a new actuality, but rather God's power and will actuates all potentialities. For that which is actual stands to that which is potential as unmoved to mover, and as logical to real. Irenaeus of Lyon was the first church father I read on my journey to Catholicism. This father impressed upon me so strongly that I even took his name at confirmation and asked daily for his intercession. I will never forget the words of this soon-to-be doctor of the church. God doesn't need us. If anyone is committed to a Christian paradigm that contradicts this statement, then I am most certain that they have departed from the faith of our fathers. In absolutely no way does God bend, move, or become something he was not because of us. If anyone perceives God as related to the world in such a way as to acquire something from us, then in a sense he does need us, for whatever it is he acquired is dependent upon us. This is why Maximus the Confessor, following the Fathers, is absolutely clear. God experienced no change when the second person of the Trinity became incarnate. Our Lord shows this most openly when he fervently prays in the garden to move God to change due to his lower sensible faculties, naturally longing to stay united with its principal life. And at the end, Christ shows us that we cannot change the divine will, but must submit to his will, which is unchangeable. Not my will, but yours be done. The human will didn't move God's will, but God moved the human will, drawing out of it obedience. Now there's so much more that we could consider, such as the causal relation between the logoi and the individual essences that are localized in each particular. Knowledge for God would negate any idea of a real relation. Perhaps in a future video we could discuss this, but for now, let what has been said suffice. Having laid out the doctrine of relations, I hope that the listener can now have a better understanding of what is and is not meant by a mixed relation. Anyone who says that God cannot love us, care for us, or interact with us has seriously misapprehended the philosopher's articulation of relations. If one does a closer investigation of the fathers of the faith, they will find, as I have presented, that the way in which they describe God's relation to the world is not repugnant to, but rather identical to what Thomas Aquinas means by a logical relation. Thank you all for watching this episode, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your friends. Comments are always welcome because it matters what you think. Until next time, God bless.